to cut taxes by €7 billion, providing a €1,000 acorn savings fund to every newborn in the country, and breaking up the Office of Public Works. These are some of the promises made in the Fine Gael manifesto launched yesterday. And Paschal Donohoe, Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform and candidate in the Dublin Central constituency, joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Ciara.
I have to put it to you that you were always referred to as one of the most prudent, I suppose, ministers for finance and then ministers for public expenditure that we've ever seen, and that was your kind of your bailiwick. You're now being referred to by some as a tribute act to Charlie McCreevy. What do you say about that?
I'd go back to my record, I'd go back to my view about the future. For most of my time in politics, I faced pretty relentless criticism for not spending enough. It's due to the many years of work and the arguments that I've made that we have budget surpluses in the first place, that we were able to deal with a pandemic, able to deal with a cost of living crisis, able to get through Brexit, able to change our corporate tax model and keep our public finances safe. And not only do I believe in the safety of our public finances, so does Simon Harris. And the plans that we've outlined today in our manifesto yesterday refer to a level of spending growth within our economy that in current terms, I believe with what I know about the world at the moment and what I believe can happen, I do believe is appropriate. And in terms of investing in our country's future, looks at our existing plans and adds to that the money from the Apple judgment. And I believe that's appropriate.
Okay. Paschal, there's a huge spend involved in these, and it's coming off the back of a budget only a month ago, roughly speaking, where there was no evidence that, like, we've gone from things like saying that we were going to build, Fine Gael wanted to build 250,000 new homes over 5 years to now 300,000, and everything is like that. Everything is like the budget plus. Everything has been sort of upbuilt. €1 billion in investment in increasing services and reducing waiting lists for children and reducing the cost of childcare. That might sound great, but that's €1 billion of current expenditure. The Acorn Saving Fund, that's over €500 million a year. Again, current expenditure. Half of those people are people who wouldn't have a medical card, for example. So they might be construed as well off or middle class people. You're giving them $250 million every year for their kids.
So let's deal with each of those in turn. Firstly, in terms of those commitments, they're all over a 5-year period. And I do think it's appropriate that once a government comes to an end, that each political party lays out its commitments and what it would want to do over 5 years. And Ciara, look, I was the Minister for Finance who was in the room when I was told that 600,000 people would become unemployed during the pandemic. I have dealt with all of the different challenges to our public finances. And for me, the cornerstone of what we must do is keep our public finances safe. So underpinning each of those commitments there is also a commitment to continue to put up to €6 billion aside every year, which is what I've done every year as Minister for Finance to keep our country safe. Oh. And each of the commitments that we have laid out there, they are costed and they look at what we would do up to 2030.
Okay, but one of the issues that we're going to have in the economy very likely going forward, and we'll be speaking about this to our next guest at around 8:15 this morning, is a Trump presidency rather than pregnancy. I don't know where that came from. Presidency. The reality is the president-elect is saying that he wants to repatriate the profits from American companies overseas, bring them home. This is going to be one of his policies, that he will introduce tariffs on imports, that he is going to be a protectionist president. That is going to affect our tax receipts here if he does all of those things, because a huge amount of what we rely on is that foreign direct investment and is that corporate tax from those companies. So we're expecting an economic shock. And yet we're spend.
Which is why I've made the case for running budget surpluses for so many years. Which is why last year we had a budget surplus of €8 billion. Which is why every time I do a budget and every time I'm making the case for what we are doing, I face the critique for not spending every cent that is available to us. Which is why if we are facing a shock in our corporate tax receipts in the years ahead, we're facing into that with a budget surplus that largely exists of corporate tax receipts that I made the case for not spending. And the manifesto that we have, Ciara, just very quickly and very briefly, commits to setting aside again €6 billion every year.
Okay. There just is a concern that if we're facing an economic shock, that sort of historical saving isn't going to protect us forever, and this commitment to spend surely is at the wrong time.
Well, the historic savings is not really that historic. It's the culmination of a budget that just happened a few weeks ago. And those decisions do lay the foundations in terms of having a low debt as a share of national income and a very high degree of creditworthiness that myself, the Fine Gael, have worked on for so long to deal with what the future could bring. I believe the plans as we have laid out there, by virtue of the fact that the additional money that we are planning to spend from a capital perspective comes from Apple money that we already have, I believe those plans are appropriate. And then budget to budget, we take a cold, hard look at where the world is and we decide what is appropriate. But I believe the balance is right there in the manifesto.
Minister, I just want to talk to you a little bit about Senator John McGohan. Taoiseach Simon Harris has said the Fine Gael will continue to canvass for him. Have a little listen to what Tánaiste Mícheál Martin said when he was speaking to the Newstalk's Let Me Explain podcast with Sean Defoe.
I think there's a real problem there, if I'm honest. I think the nature of the attack was quite, it seems to me anyway, to have been very aggressive, to say the least. The injuries are shocking. And I think people can see, unfortunately, online the nature of the attack and whether he has learned since then and fully apologised. But I think there are issues there, if I'm honest. John McGohan may have explanations for it, but it clearly wasn't a scuffle. And there was, people had to pull him off, literally. In my view, it does raise very serious questions. Ultimately, the people of Louth will decide on it.
Would a Fianna Fáil candidate who'd done the same thing still be a candidate?
I'm not so sure, if I'm honest, that they would. And it certainly is a matter that the party would have considered.
Fianna Fáil saying that if it was a Fianna Fáil candidate, they're not sure that they would be a candidate any longer. What do you have to say to that?
I have to have recourse to what has been the process here, that there was a criminal trial in relation to this. John McGohan was not found guilty in that criminal trial. I have to then look at the engagement that I've had with him, where in the aftermath of that criminal trial, I found somebody that works very hard at being a politician who's put his name in front of the people of Louth.
But it found civilly liable within a court in this country as well.
And John has paid, I understand, a significant fine in relation to that, which he should. I think any act of violence, any incident like this, I obviously find extremely regrettable, and it's not one at all. And it's one that, of course, I have to acknowledge.
Both sides of your mouth there, Paschal. You're saying, we have no support for violence, but this is the person that we're putting up for election.
It's why I said there a moment ago, Ciara, though, in situations like this, I do have to go back to what is the process in relation to it. And it is still not for me to second guess the outcome from a criminal trial. He was acquitted. He's since paid a large fine for it, which he should do. And from the engagement that I've had with John over recent years, I find somebody that works very hard at his job that will be making his case to his constituents.
For those of us who've been looking at the government, the coalition government, the last number of years, it appears to have worked relatively well together. People are relatively civil towards each other. It would appear that there is an increasing I suppose, rhetoric coming from both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and indeed the Greens, where you're all backbiting now and you're all sort of having a go at each other. Is that the case? Is it every party for itself at this case? I mean, how do you differentiate yourselves from Fianna Fáil?
So at election time, every party makes their case separately. And I've little doubt that if we were campaigning in a united way, we would be facing criticism in a different way from other quarters. Let me just say two things in relation to it. I have great regard for all of my colleagues who we served in government with, at a personal level and a professional level, and a high level of respect for them. I do think it's also understandable that in an election time, we all put forward our different claims and we engage in debate in relation to it. What I want to see happen is a debate, not an attack.
So no actual rift?
Well, there are differences of opinion, but we are different political parties. And I think you can both respect people you've worked with in the past and say you want to work with them again in the future, but also say that we have differences. And those are the differences that are teased out at election time. But I do believe it's a government that worked well together at terribly difficult moments for your listeners. I have respect for all who were involved in it, but equally, understandably, I'll be making my case just as my colleagues in the other two parties will be making their case too.
Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform and candidate in the Dublin Central constituency, Paschal Donohoe, thank you very much for joining us.